В этом году Android-разработчики остались без традиционного Google I.O., где можно было увидеть людей из Google и лично поспрашивать их о наболевшем. Но, к счастью, на Mobius есть возможность сделать примерно то же самое. У нас в этот раз целых несколько спикеров из Google, и некоторые из них как раз будут отвечать на вопросы. И сейчас будет один из них, Бен Weiss. У нас самих есть вопросы к нему, которые мы зададим, но еще интереснее было бы увидеть и озвучить ему ваши вопросы. Так что присоединяйтесь к телеграм-чату этого выступления и смело спрашивайте все, что вам интересно в связи с Android-разработкой узнать у Google. А озвучивать эти вопросы будет участник программного комитета Mobius Владимир Иванов. Поприветствуем их обоих. Владимира многие знают по предыдущим Mobius. Он работает над Android-частью программы уже даже не помню сколько сезонов. И передаю ему слово.
Hi, folks. So here, Ben Weiss is here with me from Google. So before we start, I want to ask to introduce himself and tell us what he's doing basically at Google.
Hi. Like Vladimir just said, I'm Ben. I work at Google, based just out of London. And I work on the Android developer relations team as an engineer. I work very closely with the internal engineering teams, with external developers. I worked over the years on a lot of different technology, and one of the key things that I do is make sure that you as developers get stable products that you can work with, and if there's issues that you find, get them resolved and get them back into the engineering teams. Also, I create conference sessions, I create samples, libraries. The latest one was the dynamic feature Navigator, which we'll talk a little bit about later during the interview. And I've been working with a lot of technology stacks as well on the Android side, from animations, transitions, over, for example, instant apps, app bundles, a lot of things around Gradle, build times, modularization, and now currently on dynamic features and the likes. Thanks very much, Vladimir. So since it's the first time that we actually talk in person, so what is it you do?
So here I'm a member of a Android program committee. So in Mobius we have two parts, like iOS and Android one, and I'm part of the Android program committee. So it basically means that I'm talking to speakers, trying to help them prepare better presentations, making them tailoring the talks for our audience, and to make those talks as interesting as it is possible for the program. Unfortunately, the part of the job is to rejecting the talks, but I think this is necessary for making a good program.
Yeah, I have been part of several program committees as well, and it's always tricky to go both ways. And thank you very much for, over the years, asking me to come back. And I'm very happy that we took this chance today to being able to finally talk in person, well, via video conference, but like this. I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm excited as well. So do you feel comfortable like starting with the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I have several ones, and what I want to start talking about is, that Android is already 10 years plus old, right? And a lot of development process for Android changed during those 10 years. But what I'm really interested in right now is how do you see like starting the development of Android in 2020? How does it look like?
A lot different than what it used to be a couple of years back. So even if we take just a couple of years back to Android Lollipop, when the holo design system was replaced with material design, back then things were a lot different as well. So nowadays we have a lot of very new things. We have a very opinionated approach from Google, which is the Jetpack libraries and the architecture components around this. We do have a lot of new things coming in, a lot of change that has been asked for by developers throughout the years. A lot of the development from especially the Jetpack libraries is being done in open source. We have Compose on the horizon. We have Android app bundles, which is a new app distribution format. We have libraries on, say, lifecycle is not as hard as of a thing anymore, because we have view models, for example, that you can do. You can hook into things like that. You can now even with Android 11 control your keyboard, like a keyboard, how it comes in and out of your application, which has been requested for years. So as you see, things have been evolved, and it's a mature ecosystem. And that mature ecosystem also means that we made choices to make life for developers easier over time as we speak. We now do have over the past couple of years, we had that already, but we have our own IDE. Back in the day, there was a platform. It was based on Eclipse. We had the Android Developer Toolkit, part of that, and plugins into Eclipse. And at some time, we switched over to IntelliJ-based development with Android Studio, and we have Gradle as our build system, which replaced and Maven-ish, which was partially supported, and the configurations through Eclipse, which were not really reproducible. Also, as one of the things that I really, really enjoy is using Kotlin as a recommended language for Android, for developing Android apps, because it is, well, as kind of the marketing slogan goes, it's a fun, concise language. But everybody that has written Kotlin and has gotten a hold into it agreed with me on this, that they really enjoyed writing it. And one of the cool things is that we recently also said that coroutines is our recommended solution, or the preferred solution for writing concurrent code on Kotlin with Android.
Yeah, I was talking about for a couple of years already. Since the coroutines were announced, I was like, hey, at least we can replace RxJava with something decent. And right now we have the proper support for reactive programming from Kotlin coroutines perspective, flow and state flow. That's it, right? So these are becoming kind of standards as well.
Yeah, for Rx, for I know that we all know that there is more than one language that developers want to write their code in. So for folks that are using Rx, there are reactive bindings for existing libraries already, and these things are definitely there to stay. And if there's things where developers have a need for us to add this to what's existing, then we always are open to input, and we're looking into the options that are there. So if there is a critical mass of developers that has a need for things, then we're definitely open to listening and to seeing what needs to be done in order to make developers' lives easier.
Okay, just a small side note. So folks, basically, if you have any needs or whatever, so Ben is the person you need to contact to and just say, hey, this is a pain.
Yeah,
okay.
I usually delegate all this through the issue tracker. So issue tracker, Google.com. The teams take a close look at this. A lot of the teams working on Jetpack actually prioritize their work based on this. So if there is issues on there that have a lot of stars, that have a lot of activity and reproducibility, then the teams actually look at this and take this as one of the key factors for making their decisions on product planning. That doesn't mean that if somebody says, I desperately need this, that it's going to be implemented anytime soon or in one of the next cycles, but it definitely means that it is on the radar of the development teams and the engineering teams. So it's totally worth putting all your inputs in there, same as we look at questions on Stack Overflow and the like as well.
Okay, so you basically covered the landscape of Android development at the moment, and I'm really glad that Google at least has an opinion on the architecture, on the best practices. So what I want to talk about is those best practices. How do they evolve for Android development? Because back in the days, there were no best practices at all. And then there were emerging some like, hey, use fragments or use whatever. Right now they're like, use view models, right? So how do they evolve? How this process looks like of evolving the best practices for Android?
That's a really good question, and it really depends on a lot of things. So there is progress in multiple lanes, I would say. So there's a couple of slower things that move step by step, and there's a couple of really fast ones. So slow means, does it make sense to adopt a language because it is the right thing for developers. That process takes time. And that's a process that where we see there's things like how does it, so there's first internal evaluation that takes a lot of time. Then there's evaluation with the, in that case, with JetBrains, there's a lot of things around also getting the tooling ready and everything up to date, that it's the best working way for developers. So that is kind of on the slower lanes. Then there is conceptual things like material design that have been coming in, and that just took time from, well, the beginnings of Android until, well, Android Lollipop, when we revealed that to the world. And these things take time, and they evolve with the needs of developers and the needs of users. So there was questions and requests from developers. How can this be better? We desperately need these things for making designs better on Android, because they basically back in the days were, well, not as good. And now with material theming and material styling and all of this, which has since then continued to evolve on faster paces, because the main shift has happened with Lollipop release there. These happen over time. Same as with, say, if we take a look at another direction, app bundles, and before that, APKs, when they came into being with Android in the first days. So as still the installation format, there were a lot of things and steps in between that and Android using app bundles as distribution format, because you had the APKs and there were optimizations, there were updates to the signature schemes, there were changes in the way that the Play Store can distribute things. There were things with APK differentiations. So that means that there's only a delta between what's on the device already and what is on the Play Store, and only that subset of data will get sent to the device. So that makes it faster for users to install this. So there's, on the one hand, there's user-driven parts. On the other hand, there is developer-driven parts. And then again, there is major shifts for, say, Jetpack. When we came out with Jetpack, there was one thing that developers have asked for a long time, and then that we are being more opinionated and open in our development, which are two of the things that we're doing with the Jetpack libraries. So one of those things is about we have these libraries which are definitely opinionated. They're all there's a lot of people working on these, and they're very close to the platform. But we can update them and can ship them unbundled from the framework. So that means that we can make changes that are backwards compatible. One of those things, for example, being Work Manager, which has had seen a lot of predecessors in the first place, which are baked into the platform. But with Work Manager itself, we can make use of these things that are baked into the platform, and we can also make use of the capabilities that we will add in the future to the platform. And developers don't have to write as much code there either. So the paradigms that we find are, we definitely want to make it easier for developers, and we want to make sure that as a developer's life is as easy as can be. But also we want to make sure that the developer has the possibility to make choices based on what they actually need. And we also want to listen. So that's kind of the very long answer to this question. Is there anything in particular that you would like me to talk about as well?
Well, this is a long answer indeed. So let's make a short resume in a couple of sentences.
So essentially, the developers, the best practices evolve through communication and conversation with developers. So there is us taking in feedback from developer communities externally as well as internally. And within developer relations, we are part of the folks that orchestrate this communication. So if we hear things and if we find out things, then if there's things that we see developers experience, then we bring these to the program managers, to the product managers, as well as to the internal teams, and we make sure that everybody gets their voice in these. And if we feel that those things have to be changed, then there will be improvements for the developers.
Like it happened with keyboard, for example.
For example, that's one of the things that developers have asked for a long time. Same thing with navigation, where a lot of developers ask us to have a de facto standard to use navigation. And we came up with something that is opinionated. Some of these opinions have been received very well. The implementation is extremely solid. Some of these things are still a bit controversial. So for example, having a greenfield application can make use of the navigation libraries in a way different way than an already existing library, for example. Not library, sorry, application.
Okay, let's speak about navigation. So I believe there's already support for deep links for basic navigation, but navigation also supports dynamic features, right? What about the support of deep links for dynamic navigation?
Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot there. So the Dynamic Feature Navigator is a library that came to mind when I started working with the dynamic features, and I saw that there is no way to use navigation with dynamic features because all the nav graphs need to know what's going on in which part in particular, and there was no way to install a dynamic feature module through navigation. So what we did is we introduced so navigation, essentially, you call the navigate function and it navigates to destination. But what we did is we sidelined that. So if you call navigate, and there should be a dynamic feature module, but it's not there. So what you do is we call a way to install the dynamic feature module, and afterwards do the navigate call. So for the deep links here, we just didn't manage to put all that into the time frame for developing it in the first versions that we shipped. So the library just went stable, and that's going to be, it is on the timeline for one of the next releases. And I do have a bug open for it, which is also publicly accessible. If you would like us to see this, if you'd like to see this in a future release, then find the bug. I'll link it later on, and then just start it.
Okay, great way to highlight the priority. So it's basically in the backlog, right? So it's in the future, but
Correct.
You need more stars. Okay, that's great to hear. That listen into the community and see what is the need out there, and see if it really helps the developers to build better experience, better apps, and like better ecosystem as a whole. Okay, so we started talking about dynamic features, right? So, and navigation is a part of the Jetpack library. What other Jetpack components do you plan or want to use in dynamic feature delivering? So, it was dynamic navigation as we discussed. So, what's next?
So navigation has a special place because you navigate between one and another dynamic feature module. You can do that within a graph, and sometimes these modules are not installed. For many developers, they don't have to touch. So many other libraries, they don't have to touch this part because navigation already has the basics covered. We do have for the Play Core library that is available for developers already. We have a Kotlin extension library on that, so it makes it more fun to write Kotlin with that. So we have flow in there, and we have encapsulation. So we do use that for the installation listeners and the likes. One of the things that would be great to have, but will require some more foundational work, is having annotation processing that works across boundaries for dynamic features as well. But that is not a thing that will be happening anytime soon, just because there's a lot of foundational work that has to be done. One of the things that definitely happens is that when Jetpack libraries are being developed, when there's new features coming in, we always ask ourselves the question, is there anything that we need to do in order to support dynamic feature modules? Is there anything in particular, not just for dynamic feature modules, but also for on-demand delivery? Are there any things that you would like to see, or just also in the audience? If there's things that you would like to see, let us know. If there's things that you see that are missing, let us know. We don't always see these because even though we are staying close to actual development, we sometimes get lost in, writing frameworks, libraries, and the likes. So if these things happen, again, I point you to the bug tracker. It's one of those things that we use, and we'll talk a little bit about feedback and the likes later, but please make use of this because we really listen to this. We want to know what you as developers need. This looks like there is a minor interference at the moment. I'm just check here.
Yeah, it seems like it is.
Yep. Good thing is that we have talked a little bit about a couple of the questions that we wanted to discuss in the first place. So I can take a little bit of a pre-read here, if that's okay, and we'll just wait for Vladimir to come back.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, that's great. So one of the things was, how does Google improve supporting apps in the Play Store, and if they have been reduced in size? Is it a requirement, or is it just for better user experience? So there's two things on this. So one of them is, if you have a smaller app, your users are a lot more likely to install it. Because we have looked at this and we have talked about this in previous sessions. So one of that is, if your app shrinks by, say, about 3 megabytes, users are 1% to 2% more likely to install it. This depends a bit on where your users are located. So in countries where the mobile connectivity is easily available, then it's more towards the 1%. If it is a region where users are having access to mobile data services is harder, then it's more towards leaning towards 2%, or maybe even in some areas even more. So it is one of the things that you should be doing for, if you're reducing your app size, it's one of the things you should be doing for your own sake, for your users' sake, and for your company's sake. Because that means that, well, if you have more users, you can have more, probably, if you sell it, more money or more ads revenue, or more of the platform, more users on the platform that you're using or you're providing. Another thing is, it is, well, with what I also covered a bit earlier is that we have Delta installs available. So that means that if your user already has installed the app in the first place, then that means that only a Delta has to be sent down to that user. So the base application is already there, and only parts of the application will be installed as new features come in. That happens through a couple of algorithms on the Play console and Play Store side, that we just know what needs to be downloaded, and then we can patch the APK locally. Another thing is, if you're interested in seeing what the Play Store actually ships, there is a new Play console that we just opened up, and one of those things that's in there is the App Bundle Explorer. With the App Bundle Explorer, you can take a very close look into what's going on with your APKs and with your bundle. So the bundle gets uploaded to the Play Store, then it gets then a set of APKs get built. And these APKs get then sent to your users and to the devices, depending on the device configuration, say language, hardware configuration with CPU architecture. So whether it is a 64-bit architecture, whether it's a ARM architecture or anything else on the architecture side. Also the features that it can run. So there could be features that they can run from, say, the device does have a camera, or it has capabilities to, or it has a machine learning chip or things like that. And that depends. These things depend. So these dependencies make sure that only the right things get sent to the device. So if a device doesn't have a camera, you won't need a module that requires a camera. There's a little bit of prerequisite that you have to do, but there's also the benefit that you might gain users because you don't send them things that they don't need. Another thing is that you can be using, if you're interested in this a little bit more in depth in how we support apps on the Play Store, is the internal app sharing, which is a really cool feature that I very much enjoy working with. So internal app sharing is essentially you have on the one hand with the Play Store, you have the internal sharing, you have published betas, you have public track and all the likes, but you also have a thing which is completely separate. It uses the same delivery mechanisms and all that, but it is a separate, it's not a track, but you can upload your bundles there or your APKs, and you can download them to your device. There is immediate turnaround. You can have a very limited set of users there. So it's perfect for your internal development. So you could even have this scripted, and that means you upload an app bundle, and that app bundle, then you could download that to your device. And one of the really cool things about this is that this app bundle can be debuggable. So that means you can upload, you can download, you can attach your debugger, and you can actually step into, say, dynamic feature delivery code directly on this APK, or on the APKs that have been sent to your device from the Play Store. Another really cool thing about it is that you don't have to increment version codes, because version code increments are, well, you have to do them for a regular upload to the track on the Play Store every time you upload a new APK or a new bundle. For internal app sharing, you don't have to do this. You literally just take whatever Android Studio or Gradle gives you and drag and drop it over there, or use your script, and you can upload it every time. So these uploads are extremely cheap for you to work with. And that also gives you a possibility to share that with a set of testers. And if you look on the Android Developers Medium channel, there is a blog post that I wrote about this a while ago on how you can use internal app sharing and how you can use the Play Store development and publication tracks. Do we have Vladimir back by now? Hello.
Hello.
Well, hello, welcome back. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, perfect. So those are great news, and you know that there's a funny thing here in Russia. We have a food retailer, and their application, not for Android, but for iOS, it weighs like 700 megabytes, and their basic function is just displaying the loyalty card that you can present in the shop. It was like, what? 700 megabytes, really?
That is the size of more than some operating systems that I've seen. Okay. Interesting.
You know. So yeah, folks, you need to pay attention to the sizes. Google Play has a lot of features that can help you with this one. Can you please remind me about these localization things? When I last checked Stack Overflow about downloading, the new localizations, if the user wants to switch the language, I believe there are some manual steps that you need to take to make it happen. Can you please comment on this?
So there's two different things. So one of them is the user changes the system language. When the user changes the system language or adds another language, the new language APKs will get downloaded by the Play Store automatically at some point in the future during regular and scheduled maintenance. So say within the next 24 to 48 hours-ish. So there's no real guarantee that this will happen immediately. But if the user just adds another language, not as a primary, then just happens in the background. If you as a developer want to take this into your own hands, you definitely can. There's an API where you can request language installation, and the language installation will give you the same callbacks that you get as you would get with dynamic feature module installation. So you get you can know when a new language has been installed, when it's available, and when your application can start switching over to that. So there's two different factors in here.
Okay, so you got us covered anyway.
Yes, and if we wouldn't have, again, just plugging the issue tracker again, please file that.
Okay, I got that. Okay, thanks. So I want to go to the next question, and you mentioned it actually, this Jetpack Compose thing. We actually have a couple of speakers in the program, so they will be talking a lot, by the way, about the Jetpack Compose. I just wanted to hear your opinion, your impression. So I understand working on this like hands-on, but I believe you heard it. What do you think about it?
So from what I've seen is a lot of the folks that work with it think it is really amazing. I have, to be honest, not even written a single line of Compose code. No, it's not true. I have written Compose code in one of the first internal hackathons that we did on this. But ever since, I haven't been focusing on it. There's a big team that works on this, both from engineering and developer relations, and it is one of the key things that we're working on. And it is, like you said, you have multiple developers talking about this later at the conference. I think it's tomorrow in the evening your time, where there's two folks working on this talking. I am really looking forward to it because it is a very new paradigm. There's a lot of new things in there. It is reactive programming for your UI. You can use a lot of new things that you couldn't be using in the first place, and there's a lot of things that you can be taking a look at. The developer community has taken on a lot of things already, and with the latest releases on Jetpack Compose, I definitely recommend developers to start playing around with it, taking a look at it. Whether it's production ready or not, well, that's not for me to judge. I have seen folks writing code and using very unstable things in production, and I'm aware that there is definitely more than one application on the Play Store in production using Compose already, but there's still a lot of things in flight. But that means that you as a developer can also give a lot of input, a lot of feedback. And because it is developed mainly in the open, you can also take a look at the pre-builds and all this. And you can, since a long time ago, you can already start playing with it and influencing it. And it's great, again, because you can use Compose from in your pet project already, and once you're ready with it and once you feel familiar with it enough, then you can use it in your applications. And like with many of the things that we're doing, it's not a thing where you have to opt in on it on the it's not a one or nothing approach. It's a thing where you can go and migrate to Compose step by step.
Oh, sounds great. There are high budget back Compose, and there are tons of flaws despite the fact that it's still in the dev version. So yeah, there's a Compose Academy, and I know that some GDE is working actively to popularize it. For example, is doing great regards to this. Okay.
Yeah, Joe has been doing quite a lot of things around this already. As like you said, a lot of other GDEs have been actively investing in this, but not just GDE, but in the general developer community. There's a lot of people playing around with it, giving feedback, writing articles, and also talking to the developer teams there. And that's one of the things is that, well, with this world having shifted online a lot more this year, is where we're looking forward to getting your input a lot more through channels that weren't there before. So there's multiple Slacks where engineers on this are. So one of them is the JetBrains Slack. There's on Stack Overflow folks listening to the tags there, and a lot of the engineers are also available through Reddit or Twitter.
Vladimir is having tech issues still, so I'll replace him for a while. And we have some questions in our Telegram chat. We can switch to them for the time being.
Sure.
And there is one small funny request. A person asks, "Can you talk a bit slower?"
I'm sorry. Yes, I will try to talk slower. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here, so that's why I talk a bit faster. Apologies again.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big problem because the recording of your talk can be reviewed later, and you can slow it down. The viewer can slow it down, so I think everyone will be fine. But if it's convenient for you to speak a bit slower, that will be great.
Of course. It is. Thank you very much for the reminder. It is absolutely fair, especially to the folks that are tuning in live to this conference, to just speak a bit slower. So thanks again for the reminder.
Mm-hmm. And I go to the questions. I haven't been following exactly the same conversation, so it's possible you already answered some of them talking to Vladimir, but still. First question, is the Android navigation component going to support multiple stacks for the full support bottom navigation?
That is a really good question. It is another tricky one to implement. I, to be honest, haven't followed that one to the full extent. I know that we're investigating this. I don't know what stage we're in with this right now, but it's one of those things that has been requested quite a bit. And because of it has been requested, it has popped up on the developers team quite heavily, and I've seen some conversations on that in the past.
Mm-hmm. And okay, next question. Why is onRetain last non-configuration instance deprecated for developers, but it is a main mechanism for view model?
Again, I haven't looked into that. I would say, so just because it is deprecated for developers, that doesn't mean that, that's two things. So one of them is, it doesn't mean that internally we're not using it for good reasons, but it means that developers shouldn't be building on top of it. So for example, async task is one of those things that you also shouldn't be using. But for example, the palette library uses it internally, and that's absolutely fine. Also, we don't recommend using Alarm Manager for a lot of things other than scheduling alarms. Also, Job Scheduler, you shouldn't be using that yourself. But we just use it internally underneath Work Manager. So there's different things where the framework has, a set of rules that the framework adheres to. And on the other hand, there's some things that you have to take into account as developers, whether you should be doing that or not. And developers have, over time, asked us for opinionated approaches, and sometimes the opinion is, we thought this was really good back when we created it, but over time we realized maybe there is a couple of things you shouldn't be doing with it. So for example, things like on retain instance state, you might not want to use this because there is some things around it that cause issues to developers. Like, even if they don't cause issues to you in particular, they might cause issues to several developers. So using view model instead is the easier solution. So that's probably, in that case, again, very similarly true for it as it is for async task or job scheduler, for example.
Okay, looks like I'm back.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for those issues, folks. Okay, thank you for answering the audience questions. Let's get back to my questions then. Let's talk about the modularization. So obviously it helps a lot to fight the build time, which can reach enormous values for big applications. And the modularization is definitely a way to fight it. But what are the other benefits that you might want to use modularization for, even for small apps like 100K lines?
Yeah. I enjoyed talking about modularization so far that I did that for a longer time. I talked about it at multiple DroidCons throughout the past, and also at Dev Summit and at Google I/O as well. So thanks for bringing this up. So one of the things about modularization and why it totally makes sense to do this is for your users, because if you take a look into the dynamic features and work with them, then you can ship parts of that to your user. I know this is a lot of buy-in. A lot of this is takes a lot of time to restructure your application in a way, your existing applications in a way that that you can make use of that part. So that's one thing. The other thing is that also deployment time is a lot faster if you have a modularized application, say dynamic feature modules. Also, just to make sure that I call this out very clearly, using dynamic feature modules doesn't mean that you have to use on-demand delivery. It just means that you have your code structured in a modularized way. But modularization also means another thing, which is you might not use dynamic feature modules, but you might use libraries, which also are modules. And you can also call this modularized development. There are a couple of different things. So the dependencies are a bit different, and the way that the dynamic feature modules depend on an application are... So dynamic feature modules depend on an application, whereas a library is dependent on whereas an application is dependent on the library. So that means that you can make use of your library's code within the application, but you cannot use your dynamic feature modules code in the application without using reflection, which, well, is the one way to instantiate, which is fine because that's the way that it works within the platform as well. another really, really good benefit aside of build time for developers and deployment time on devices, because, well, you just have to ship you have to also on your emulator or on your test device, because you only have to install the APKs that are being changed. Another key thing is that your application will be a lot cleaner on the edges. So that means that you have a APK that has, or a dynamic feature module that will be shipped as an APK that has very clear boundaries. So it's very hard to have cyclical dependencies in there, or just dependencies that are just polluting from one to the other, and so you don't have these things as much. So that means that it's a lot easier as your company and your application potentially grows, that you have these boundaries, and that makes it easier to form teams around them, and that makes it a lot easier to see whether there's issues that have been side effects that have been introduced into this, rather than having with a monolithic application. Because if you have a monolithic application, it's easy to just use, well, this one dimension that comes from over there, this one style that comes from over there, this one constant that comes from over there, and they all don't belong together. And then somebody decides to make a change somewhere, and you wonder, why doesn't this work anymore properly the way that it should be working? So with dynamic feature modules in a modularized application, you have to define very clearly what is accessible from where, through the base module, where you can make things available globally, or if it only should be available through a dynamic feature or within a dynamic feature module, then that would be in that dynamic feature module scope.
Okay, so basically you're saying that in 2020, modularization is a kind of a best practice. So you may want to follow it anyway.
Correct. If you're starting off with a greenfield application, I very much recommend going into a modularized app. If you have an application that's already existing, it might make sense to start developing new features in modularization in a modularized way. And if you have the time, development cycles to do this, you can also start by just pulling out libraries and making sure that things are in libraries, because that way you only have to build these libraries if you make changes in there. And the dependency graphs, basically, you don't have to compile everything all the time anymore. I know that Gradle has a lot of improvements there as well, but not just with Gradle, but also with Android, we support these things for developers. So yeah, long story short again, totally recommend using a modularized architecture where you can. And if you can start off with it, I recommend using dynamic feature modules as your foundation for each of the features. If you have questions on this, there's a lot of documentation, blog posts, recordings out there already as well.
Yep, sure. Thanks for that. How do you provide the feedback for the features you were involved in, like Mavic or dynamic features? How to do that for the developers out there?
So one of the things that I personally listen to is, I look into things like, I look at the Android dev subreddit, I look at Twitter a lot, I look at Stack Overflow, what's going on there, I look at the issue tracker and see what's going on there. I talk to folks at conferences, and I read a lot of blog posts that are written within the community. I read a lot of the things that are going out there. I look at conference abstracts, I watch conference sessions and all that. So basically I try and have a very wide education on what the developer community currently needs. And also I take a look at our internal development roadmaps and the developments that have been happening, and take a look at what I technically am the right person to work on. So that's, for example, why I decided that the Dynamic Feature Navigator is a library that developers will use in the future, because dynamic features are definitely one of those things that developers should be taking a look at when they start development or when they make changes to their applications. And navigation will be one of the issues that they will be facing, because, well, navigation is a thing that developers always have to do. And with the navigation architecture component, we have one of those things that we have in there. I think a lot of the folks do that similarly. And also, in that case, there were, so I think just to take it like from the abstract a bit concrete, I talked about this with a couple of folks at multiple conferences, and then met up with Ian Lake at Android Dev Summit 2 years ago, and we started chatting about it. And we agreed that it's a good idea. And I talked with the team on the Play Store side and the Play Serving side, whether they think what they think about it. And we started writing a couple of documents around, started talking about it. And over time, that bubbled up in my priorities. And I started working together with Wojtek and a couple of other folks on this to get the library and the Android Studio support and the tooling support ready. And then, well, we started rolling it out. And kind of happy that it's out of alpha right now.
Okay, so if you want to have some attention, you may want to write a blog post with the title "How the Navigation Library Ruined My App."
Well, I've read things like that before as well, and I've been reading a lot of things that are very populist, where people just say, "Oh, this is really bad," and if there is a real valid opinion on this, if there's a real valid substance in it, then that's good, because that really helps. If it is just ranting, then the first time I'm like, okay, good, somebody had a bad day. The second time I'm like, yeah, maybe I might just not read this anymore. And the third and fourth time, I just don't care, because this person's opinion has over time proven to be just a waste of my time. And I don't really read these anymore. But if somebody has, and I know a couple of people that have very strong opinions that have been proven very valuable, but I also know the extreme opposite.
Yeah, definitely. So the constructive feedback is always welcome, I suppose.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I value about the company within Google. The thing is that there's a lot of opinions out there, and I am very happy if my opinion is wrong. And that's a mindset that a lot of people share. And with that mindset, it's a lot easier to get the right things out to developers, which ultimately is my job. I want to make sure that the things are perfect. Perfect is really hard to achieve, but very good for developers. And we improve on these over time. And in many cases, I can only do this if I take in the right feedback, listen to the right folks, and also help educate the right folks on this, and help change opinions as well as change my opinion myself, or get it changed.
Okay. I believe for a lot of people out there, it is really to provide feedback, because they may struggle with something in their day-to-day life, but it's hard to write an article, because it's completely other job than writing the code, and you need to approach it other way, and go into I don't know, Android dev subreddit, maybe also a bit stressful at least. But I really encourage everybody to do that, and go there and to discuss with everybody what are the problems that you may have, and just feel connected to the community. Feels great.
Also, I do agree that the not just a subreddit, but in general, putting yourself out there is a huge commitment, and sometimes you don't want to do this. One of the great things that is out there as well is local developer communities. And when I started out Android development, there weren't a lot of developers out there, so it was literally just 5 people sitting around a table, and we talked about what is this new thing with Android, and how to get a phone, and why would I be using this, and why should I develop it? So why should I start developing applications for that? And over time, these communities have proven extremely valuable to the local developer community, because that developer community has grown over time, and a lot of really true bonds have been formed. A lot of people have found their jobs. A lot of people have solved technical issues through that. And even though there is the local constraint in many cases, because people usually just went to these meetings and just started talking with folks locally. I did that in Berlin, and I used to organize the community there for multiple years before I moved to London. And these things are extremely valuable as well. And on the other hand, I encourage everybody that is interested in writing things out. That totally makes a lot of sense. And there is always going to be somebody that might just have, a bad day or whatever opinions on there, which are not really beneficial. And I do hope that a lot of more people that have valuable opinions and had a better day and actually want to make things better rather than just rant or be right. I want to see these things out there, and it would be great to have more of that.
Yep, totally agree. So basically, you have the community providing the feedback for you, but there's also a group of people that were called GDEs, like Google Developer Experts. So do they influence the development much? Do they provide some, I don't know, some special pieces of information that you take into account with the priority, let's say?
To some extent, yes. So, well, just the GDEs is Google Developer Experts. There are Google Developers Experts for a lot of different categories. There is for the web, there is for Flutter, there is for Android, there is for cloud, there is for machine learning, there's for a lot of these technologies that we provide. There is multiple folks that are Google Developers Expert. I know that I didn't go through the exhaustive list there, but that's just part of the big categories that are out there. I was a GDE before I joined Google. I am in charge of the Android GDE program by now, or for a long time now as well. And I have a lot of love for this community. And they provide feedback on multiple occasions, but it's not that a person provides feedback because they're a GDE. A person is a GDE because they provide a lot of feedback to the community, to us as Google, to the developer teams, and they also have proven that they are, over time, really, really helpful for the community, so that they have been doing things for the community that elevates the community and gives it more information than we put out there by adding real-world expertise. And also there in many cases, folks, well, in all cases, folks that have very deep understanding of the platform that they are a GDE of. So every Android GDE is in itself they're experts. And there's a lot that I learned from the GDE over time. So there's folks that I just approach and say, hey, I've got a problem with this. Can you help me? And that's kind of the right person. If a person is asked that, then that's a good sign that they are on the track to being a GDE.
That's good to hear. So what makes a good GDE then?
Well, take a look at a lot of the folks that are... Sorry.
Aside of being an expert, a technical, what makes it like being a good GDE in particular?
So it is a community program. So that means that Google recognizes outstanding contributions to the community, and there's multiple programs where we do this. One of them is the GDG Organizer program. One of them is the Women Tech Maker Ambassador program. One of them is the Launchpad Mentorship program. One of them is the GDE program. And I'm sure we do have a couple of more somewhere. But for the GDE program, it is, like as with all these programs, it is helping the community to grow. And helping the community to grow and become become technically better, as well as a better place for folks in that community, as in being an inclusive place, being a place that actually helps people to become better at their craft, at their profession, or just at their passion. There's also, I forgot mentioning them, but there's also developer student clubs, which means that there's folks that are usually at a university and they talk about technologies and they work with that, and they all get support from us from material side, as in there's we create presentations, and once we created those presentations, we sometimes share them with them. There is input from our end as well for feedback, for say articles, sometimes for recordings that they do. If folks are interested in this, then we sometimes can provide these, and we essentially we have a lot closer direction contact with these folks. But to answer the part where it comes to community, they just help grow the community, and they just help, well, grow as in not adding more people to the community, but help grow the mindset in the community, help grow the community from their expertise. And take a look at a lot of the folks that are out there. So you can just go and if you use Google and just search for Google Developers Expert, there's a lot of them are in multiple places. And I know that there is, 2 in Russia right now, if I recall correctly, 3 or maybe even 4 Russians that have been moving all over the place. I know that there is a couple of folks that create podcasts in Russian, and that's another thing. Is I know that a lot of developer communities don't have English as their native language, so that is not a hurdle as being a GDE. That is actually encouraged. And I know that Russia is one of those communities where there's a vast developer ecosystem and a vast developer community out there, and a lot of the content that is created and consumed is in Russian, and that is awesome. And we want to make sure that somebody that helps the local community grow actually gets recognized for that as a GDE as well. So we don't need anybody to create content in the language that, well, the languages that I understand or somebody on our team understands, but the language that the developer community needs. And there's multiple other ones. For example, in Japan, a lot of the developers speak Japanese rather than English as their main language. In South America, it might be Portuguese or Latin American Spanish, or in Spain, it's also Spanish. In Thailand, it's Thai. In Vietnam, it's Viet. It's like these things. It totally makes sense to have this possibility for GDEs to grow as a GDE as well, and also get the recognition with their local community, with their local languages.
Yep, I agree. So we have Denise included for Android, and I think we have Alexandra Denise for. And actually, and we have another Alexander for Android as well.
There's Eugene Matiszuk, Alexander Efremkov, and Denise Lukludov. That's the three that are, well, two of them are based in Russia as well at the moment. But I know that Denise has been doing a podcast over the past years and is still doing a podcast and still doing that in Russian. And I very much appreciate that because it helps the local community a lot rather than just switching over to other things. But I really appreciate that he still does this.
Yeah.
So again, one of the things that... oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well... Like I said, GDE helps the community grow, and in order to be a GDE, easy indicator for a person itself, whether they are on the track to being a GDE is: do people increasingly start asking me questions about technical things as well as about community things, and am I comfortable with answering them? Is it okay for me to do this? And that's kind of what really makes sense as a GDE is you're kind of an anchor for your community, and you're kind of a person that really helps your community to grow. And you're very comfortable with this. And that's kind of what I have seen over the past years, that folks that are great at this and really enjoy doing that, they usually make really good GDEs as well.
Oh, got it. Okay, I think we have just 15 minutes left, so I want to allocate this time for questions from the audience. So, folks, I think we already, thank you for answering my questions. So there are already a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm gonna just read it to you. The first question is there any ongoing development to support app bundles in Firebase App Tester?
I can generally not comment on ongoing development because those are things that are not for me to announce. The question around testing with Firebase is one of them. We do have things on the Play Store that you can use for running your tests against devices. There's things for Firebase that you can use there as well. We have heard this question a couple of times, and again, it's one of the things that I unfortunately can't comment on at the moment.
Okay. So, folks, no questions about the future plans, please.
You can ask them. I can't answer them.
Yeah. So the next question, not about the future. Typical question: MVP versus MVVM versus MVI. Which pattern is more close to you? I believe. Which do you prefer and why?
I don't write real-world applications. I write libraries, I write samples, I write code that is in the framework. So that is not a question that applies to me in general. I know of all of those different patterns. I know of some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks. And as a developer, I recommend use what makes sense for your community, use what makes sense for your team, use what makes sense for you as a developer, what you feel comfortable with, what you think your information architecture is the right thing to do. We do have the architecture components blueprints out there that you can take a look at for multiple different angles, multiple different ways that can guide you to have an architecture that is following a pattern to that certain extent. But even before all of those things were there, we wrote Android apps and they all more or less worked, and that's fine. It's just giving you more structure. So use it in a way that your team decides that makes a lot of sense, and then stick with it.
So no preferences from your side because you're not doing apps, but just go and pick up the architecture that fits you the most, right?
Correct.
Okay. Next question. So you mentioned that you were a GDE before joining Google. Doesn't happen often that the person that is GDE then joins Google.
I know of several GDE that joined Google, but it's not a path that is kind of normal, because working at Google is a whole different thing to working on applications. I used to work on applications before, and I enjoyed writing applications that were consumer-facing a lot. Like I just said in the last question, is I haven't written real-world applications in a long time. I have been working on a couple of bigger sample applications that have different architectures, but they're not. I don't look at these anymore in this way. But yeah, it happens that folks that are GDE get hired by Google.
Okay. Next question. How does the communication of GDEs with Google look like? Do you have some secret chats with inside information or what?
I could tell you, but you would have to sign an NDA before that. No, yes, we do talk with GDEs in multiple ways. A lot of the communication, as a lot of the things that we're doing, is out in the open as long as we can. So we talk with GDE at conferences. We look at different blog posts. We talk with them on the issue tracker, on Twitter, on the Reddit, on like all the different things. And obviously, there are a couple of meetings where nobody else is invited to. We have these things as well. We do have ways where we have communication that is just very close, similar to any other way of communication. You don't communicate everything with the world, but since it's a community program, like I just said, we want to make sure that we communicate as open as we can with everybody.
Okay. If we're speaking about GDE, so what is the way to become one? So I got that sharing the content, helping the community grow. What are basically the next steps? So
the process, I can just quickly outline that, is you create you create content. It's not about the amount of content. It's about how helpful it is for the community over a period of time. Then after a while, you get referred to the program. Then you write down those things that you have been doing over the past. They get reviewed. And the next step would be an interview with a GDE, which is then followed by an interview with a Googler and a product expert. All these information gets reviewed and then decided whether the information that we got out of this makes sense for you to become a GDE at this point. Or, which happens a lot as well, is seeing, oh, this person is on a really, really good track, but there's a couple of things where we see that they could be doing things in order to actually elevate the community or elevate it even more. So one of the main answers that I have to take a look that I had to give in the past was that the content isn't technical, doesn't have enough technical depth. So there have been articles, have been samples, which are essentially what we have been putting out there from what we already have been putting out there, and that was their main contribution. And while it makes a lot of sense to have contribution on a level where it makes where it amplifies the message that we already have out there with say documentation and the likes, a GDE also has to help and elevate the developer community.
Okay. Do you have any quotas on countries, for example? So some limitations on, I don't know, on the group of the GDE or the geographical area for the program?
Maybe no, we do not. So there's obviously we want to make sure that every person that is helping the community to an extent where we see these would be an expert. Yes, that totally makes sense that they become an expert. There are a couple of areas where there's a lot of GDE, so say Central Europe and the United States. So with these, we make a lot of sense to. That makes a lot of sense from the developer ecosystem as well. But also, there's a lot of regions where we're missing. Well, if you take a look at the GDE versus the GDE to developer population ratio, then it would make a lot of sense to have more GDE there. But there is no quota where it would say we only take accepting X GDE in this region or Y GDE in this region. We don't do that. If a person is helpful for the community, helps the community grow, is also, well, that's another thing, is a person that helps and elevate people, then they're very welcome to have a discussion with, in many cases, other GDE or their local ecosystems developer lead, and talk about what, becoming a GDE.
Okay. I believe there are also developer relation managers in each of the country who
Correct.
can help with this as well. So for Russia, we have Zviat Kartava. We have his contacts. You can contact him via GDG, which are our friends actually. We collaborate a lot. So yeah, the communications channels are out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next question. Sure.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Please ask a question. We just have so much time. I'm very happy to go through questions rather than me hearing myself babble about random things.
Okay. What about the HILT and DFD? What? I'm not sure I know what DFD means, but this may be somehow connected to Dagger. I mean, because HILT is based on subcomponents instead of component dependencies, there are some issues with using also with DFD means dynamic feature delivery, and also with navigation.
Yes. We're looking into things there. HILT is a fairly new library that we have been using internally a lot. There are a couple of talks and a couple of there's a lot of information coming out soon on this, and also it is because it is a library and it is unbundled from the platform and the framework. We will be adding features in the future. I again cannot say when that happens and what exactly we're doing. One of the things that I said in the past is through the session is that the annotation support for dynamic feature navigation or for dynamic features in general is a tricky topic because it needs compiler support and the likes, and it's a longer term project. But as soon as these things are there, I think these things can also happen. One of the things that you can be using for now is you can use HILT in your Bates application, and for dynamic feature modules, you can use Dagger without HILT, or recreate your own annotations at the moment.
Okay. How do you feel, HILT, by the way? Do you feel
I think it's pretty awesome.
In the dependency injection?
Yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. Give it a try. Another thing, again, like with many of the other libraries, is that you don't have to migrate everything towards it. You can just go step by step, and it totally makes sense if you already use Dagger within your application to use HILT.
Okay. How would you compare it with Coin?
I would not, because I have no experience with Coin.
Okay, got you. I had some. That's why I had to ask.
Oh yeah, how do you compare it?
I'm not sure. I don't have any experience with HILT, so I haven't read an article about it. But I want to do so in the future so that I can understand what's the difference. What is it all about? But I see that the
I'm sorry. One of the things from Google's side is since HILT's a project that we're working on, that is also a project that has been worked on internally a lot before it has been externalized, is one of the things that if it comes to adding new stuff for Jetpack libraries that is based on HILT, we will do that, but we won't do that for other dependency injection frameworks. So obviously every developer is free to use whatever they want. We just won't provide all the bindings and all the things. Well, we do provide bindings for some things, but we don't provide all the annotations and everything, and all the extensions that we provide for HILT itself.
Okay. I would say that there's already a lot of enthusiasm and hype in the community, at least in Russia, about Hilt. So everybody is excited about it. So yeah, looking forward to try.
Really glad to hear that.
Okay, I think we have. I think we got another minute for any of the questions.
Yeah.
I see that the people are typing in the questions, so that come away. But in a minute we will have to end the live video, and we're going to switch to Zoom. So everybody, if you want to join the the Discord, so please follow the link that is already in the chat of this video. So
thank you so much. I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I thank you very much for being persistent and asking me to come here. I would totally come again and answer all the questions that you had. Thank you also for talking with me in the first place on a couple of the questions that we obviously talked about in the first place, and so that technical difficulties as they arose, we could just continue the conversations there. And I'm looking forward to also talking with a lot of folks on Zoom in a moment on face-to-face with a couple of the questions that are arising, because I really enjoyed this as well.
Yeah, I enjoyed as well. So that was awesome. Thank you very much. I can't explain enough how I'm grateful. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, it's time to wrap up here, but the discussion, as Vladimir said, can go on in Zoom for long, and the link is right in the video player. The viewers can see it, and it's also in the Telegram chat of the talk. So everyone who is interested in discussing this further, just join the Zoom call, and all the other people can watch different things here. So thank you, Ben and Vladimir. Спасибо.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.